Tonight on 5 News, a former funeral director pleads guilty to fraud. The full story. Also on the show tonight, tackling costly vet bills, calls for prices to be published up front. Climate experts tell the government to prepare for more of this. And we find out why these sumo stars have been spotted around town. Plus... Hello, welcome to the programme. After a major investigation into the handling of human remains at this funeral home in Hull, a former director of the business has pleaded guilty to 35 counts of fraud, but he denies charges of preventing a lawful and decent burial. Peter Lane is outside Hull Crown Court for us this evening. Peter, good to see you. It's been a long wait for the families to get to this point, hasn't it? Talk us through what happened today. And Peter, those were the guilty pleas. What about the charges that he denied? Next tonight, more than half of us own one. But are we at risk of being ripped off when we take our beloved pets to the vets? Prices have skyrocketed in recent years, and now the competition watchdog is calling for major reforms that could transform the industry and owners' bills. Sabah Chowdhury has been finding out more. Next tonight, the government has been forced to say it will publish evidence central to a court case in which these two British men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, were accused of spying for China. The case collapsed earlier this year and it's become the subject of a furious row between Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. Well, Andy Bell was in the House of Commons watching the pair clash today. We can talk to him in Westminster now. Andy, good evening to you. This is quite a complicated story, isn't it? Can you talk us through it for us, Andy? But the key question is, what happens next? And I guess how damaging could this be? Which bid was launched to try to permanently stop migrants being housed there? Well, Rebecca Bagoro is outside the High Court for us. Good evening to you, Rebecca. What exactly happened in court today? Floods to wildfires to heat waves. You can't have escaped over the last few years. The UK weather is getting more extreme. But are we prepared to handle the changes? Climate advisors say at the moment, no. And in a new report, they're warning the government needs to be much better prepared. 5 News meteorologist Claire Nazir is here to join us now. Claire, great to talk to you about the climate as well as the weather. How worried people need to be about this?
Well, Tessa,
the time is just approaching 5:30, so here are the top 5 things you need to know today. 1, former funeral director Robert Bush has pleaded guilty to 35 counts of fraud by false representation. It's after an investigation into human remains found at his premises in Hull. He denies 30 further charges. The competition watchdog has said vets should be forced to publish price lists and put a cap on the cost of providing prescriptions. The aim is to make costs fairer and more standardised. Sir Keir Starmer has today promised to publish the evidence submitted by the government as part of the collapsed China spy case. 2 men were accused of passing secrets to China, but charges against them were dropped last month. The High Court has heard a hotel in Essex has become a feeding ground for unrest and protest. Epping Forest District Council are trying to permanently stop the Bell Hotel being used by asylum seekers. And just to say earlier, we told you that an asylum seeker staying at the hotel was found guilty of sexually assaulting 2 young girls. It was actually 1 young girl and a woman. Apologies for that. And climate advisors have warned the UK must be prepared to cope with global warming of at least 2 degrees by 2050. That includes measures like making sure new homes and hospitals can cope with the heat. Now, our next guest was married to one of the most loved men on the airwaves, one of the great radio... To say she joins me now in the studio. Really lovely to see you today, Tiggy. He was so loved by so many people, wasn't he?
he really was.
What was your motivation for writing the book?
Well, Johnnie and I for 10 years have been patrons of Carers UK, which is a charity that supports unpaid carers. And my motivation for it was really to help other carers, because if you are an unpaid carer...
Your love for Johnnie really shined through in everything you do, when you talk about him, when you write about him. But how did your relationship with him change when, as well as his wife, you became his carer?
Well, and every morning I'd go in going, is this the morning he won't be breathing? And that level of anxiety.
There's a term that you use that I find really interesting, and I think lots of people will relate to this. It'll chime with them. Anticipatory grief.
So many people have picked up on that. Because
talk about some happy memories.
Yes.
I bet there are some of them here. What are your favourite memories of Johnnie? Is there something, any particular thing you really want to remember him by and think that our viewers, his listeners, should know?
Well, I tell you what, that was a very good day. That was how strong he was. I know everyone else will remember him for his music taste and everything else, but for me, I had such admiration for him. He had a fighting spirit.
OK, don't go anywhere, because in a few minutes... You're right, Ellen. We are bowled over. We'll see you and him in a mo. Hope you're OK. Hello again. Now, it's that time of the programme when we take you around the world in 3 stories. First, let's go to Verona in Italy. A gas explosion caused this damage, killing 3 police officers who were trying to carry out an eviction. Authorities think the home was deliberately rigged to detonate when the front door was opened. 3 people have been arrested. Next, we're heading north of Quito, the capital of Ecuador. The white smoke you can see is actually tear gas, which police have used to try and disperse protesters who are blocking the motorway. They're angry about the rising cost of fuel. And now let's go to the US capital, Washington, D.C., more specifically the White House, because that's where Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, has accepted the Presidential Medal of Freedom on behalf of her late husband. It would have been his birthday. That's the highest civilian honour you can be awarded in the US. The right-wing activist was assassinated last month while speaking at a rally. Now, some unusual characters have been spotted out and about in London this week. Sumo wrestlers have been taking in the capital's sights, like Buckingham Palace here. But these sports stars are here for serious business too. A grand tournament, in fact, is being held outside of Japan for just the 2nd time ever. Here's Natalia Horquera with more.
London's
From a grand sumo tournament to a bowls world record attempt, the sport will be part of the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow next year. So today, fans were invited for the biggest ever indoor bowling lesson. Alan Jenkins went down to have a go-to. Great work, Alan. Right, what would you say if I told you Whitney Houston had released a new song? You'd be pretty shocked, wouldn't you? But that's sort of what's happened, because Britain's Got Talent star Callum Scott has released a duet of I Want to Dance with Somebody alongside Whitney's iconic vocals. He told Dan all about it. Let's have a look.